Hey guys, welcome back to The Question, where you have the questions and I have the answers. And today we're talking about asexuality in the media, specifically reviewing Big Mouth's new asexual character, Elijah. So as everybody knows from my past 3 to 4 videos, I am asexual. I'm also aromantic. And asexuality is a marginalized identity within the broader spectrum of the LGBTQ plus community. Some people don't even think that we belong in the queer community. However, there has been an increase in asexual representation in the media, so I'm going to review some of them. And I'm reviewing them because, you know, a few years ago it was very rare that we saw asexual characters in the media. Most of the time it was oh, we're gonna headcanon and then the creator makes canon that a character is asexual because they show little to no sexual attraction or they're just not in a relationship, and in contrast to everybody else in the show that is in a relationship. Some examples of this is Peridot from Steven Universe, who I think is asexual, aromantic, but it's usually just oh, well, everybody else is in a kind of relationship, everybody else has a meaningful storyline with this, but it's not really a storyline that Peridot has. It's just a lack of something that Peridot has. Same thing with Lilith in the Owl House. It's this is never really a main part of their character. They just it's a noticeable lack of something that every other character goes through. Same thing with SpongeBob, same thing with Raphael from the Shadowhunter series. These things aren't intrinsic to their characters. They're just oh, there's nothing else really there, and this is something that they don't have, therefore we're gonna make it this thing. Which has been really cool in the past because hey, usually, you know, we're not thought of at all, so at least if we're an afterthought, they're still thinking of us. However, now with Todd Chavez and BoJack Horseman and O in Sex Education, and now with Elijah in Big Mouth, I think there's enough asexual characters. We're becoming more and more of a thought about sexuality and a thought about identity that we can be picky about the people who are representing us. And that's why I'm choosing to talk about Elijah, because Elijah is very unique when it comes to asexual characters in that he breaks all of the stereotypes and tropes associated with asexuality, and I absolutely love that. I adore this character so much. So, Elijah is introduced in season 3 of Big Mouth. There's 7 seasons. Don't ask me why there's 7 seasons. I think it's going to go on forever because the issue with high school shows is that eventually you run out of high school. However, starting the show when it goes with puberty, so starting it in middle school, puberty lasts forever. People's hormones shift forever, so they could literally just keep making the show until it gets canceled, which, seeing as it's controversial enough to remain a talking point, I don't think it's going to get canceled anytime soon, especially since it's being run by the few comedians who have not been canceled yet in Hollywood. Nick Kroll, I swear to God, if you ever do anything controversial, I'm going to cry, because you're basically all we have left. And yeah, so he's introduced in season 3, and first off, he is a black male character, which, if anybody's been paying attention to Yasmin Benoit, we do not see a lot of characters of color being asexual. It's because they are hypersexualized, so they really can't view them as asexual, especially black men who are hypersexualized, hyper-aggressivized, you know, we make them out into these hypersexual, aggressive beasts, even at a young age, and Elijah is 14. But it's a subversion of that stereotype to have him be asexual, but also the subversion of oh, all asexuals are just kind of incel white women, or you know, yeah, or who look like me. And another subversion is that Elijah is a practicing Christian. I don't know if he's Catholic specifically, but he's practicing Christian, and there, you know, is a thing of oh, is it just celibacy, or is asexuality its own thing? And it's done really early on, and I'm mainly going off of what we know about Elijah from his introductory episode, as well as his kind of big episode in season 7, which discusses his asexuality. is that he is not asexual because of his religion. If anything, his religion helped like mask his asexuality because he wasn't thinking about sex, because he wasn't supposed to, because he was Christian. Which once again is that like subversion of common expectation of like, oh, well, you're just actually celibate because you're religious, or you're celibate because you're focusing on school, or you're just choosing not to have sex, where it's like, yes, he is remaining celibate probably for Christian reasons. However, we also show in his like, I think it's episode 3, season 7, that he has no issue with sexual or like perverse acts that Christianity or like Christian organizations would not be fine with. In that episode that I mentioned, he is masturbating right underneath the cross hanging in his room. You know, which according to people I know who've gone to Catholic school, is a very big no-no. You don't masturbate, you don't do anything kind of like sexual, no sexual thoughts, no sexual anything. And for him, you know, masturbation isn't sexual. However, it's like the act is still deemed impure and wrong, but he has no issue doing it. You know, it's like despite the fact that he's Christian, he's still asexual for asexual reasons, not because of his Christianity. And I love that as well. It gives that nuance, that conversation with these tropes without having a direct conversation about it, which I love, because most characters don't go that in depth. Like Todd Chavez and O, who I think are of the better side of asexual character spectrums, we don't get a conversation subverting, you know, like any kind of expectations. Like, right, for them, it's like, it's cool enough and it's enough to say that they are asexual, but we don't really figure out what that means for them or what that looks like for them within their lives. And so I like that we are using Elijah's positioning to really like dispel these common narratives and have a conversation about asexuality. And part of that conversation with this same episode that I'm talking about, we get a deeper dive into the existing asexual community, which we don't get with O in sex education. In sex education, O is the only asexual that we know of, and it causes problems for a lot of her relationships. And it's seen as kind of like the antagonist of what she does, is that, oh, she's a sex therapist, however, any kind of bad thing that she does is due to her asexuality or because of this thing she doesn't know how to deal with. With BoJack Horseman and Todd Chavez, we do see like asexual meetups. However, once again, we only see one kind of asexuality, whereas like, you know, the thing of like, oh, asexuals can date, asexuals can get married. However, we only ever see him dating other asexuals, because every time he is not with an asexual, there's problems, which these problems exist, and I don't want to like pretend that they don't, but at the same time, I think having asexual characters, we should be able to celebrate the diversity of the asexual community and the spectrum and how fluid the identity is, rather than just being like, oh, well, here's the thing, here's its limitations, but there's a bright side because community. You know, like we should be working between asexuals and allosexuals and figuring out these common grounds. And so I think they do that really well with Elijah and Missy, because Missy is not only not asexual, she's horny as fuck, because all of these kids are horny as fuck. Which, this is how I know I'm asexual, because I was definitely not doing this in middle school. I had no idea that anyone was doing this in middle school, and I'm not sure if Big Mouth is just like overly exaggerating it because it's a comedy show about sex, or if it was actually just like this and I just missed that entire part of the middle school experience. I'm not sure. And this is like his asexuality and her horniness is something that clashes a lot, and it really does make me mad that like it's viewed as like he is the problem. We never really see him getting mad at her. We always see her like really, really pissed at him for being asexual. However, we also see them, as they learn more about the asexual community and the fluidity of it and what it truly like means in a nuanced sense, we see them work to build a relationship that's more than just sex and sexuality based, which I think is really cool, because we don't see a lot of mature, well-rounded relationships in Big Mouth. Usually it's based on attraction, it's based on horniness or feeling lonely or just the status or trying to be seen as like grown up, but we never really see anyone try to nurture and work together in these relationships to make them work. And Elijah being asexual forces Missy and Elijah to have these conversations and to get to know each other better on a more like real and understood way, and I really like that for them. Anyway, portraying different parts of asexuality in season 7, episode 3, Elijah comes up with the, like issue of, oh my god, everybody's masturbating, but I'm not masturbating. Is it because I'm asexual? Do asexuals masturbate? And they're like, oh, let's look on Reddit, which, first of all, maybe we don't look on Reddit. However, like the majority of the asexual community is formulated online. And so going onto these online communities that very much do exist, like r/asexual or r/ask an asexual, are very real subreddits that Reddit has. And these are very real threads that they're pulling from, people talking about different experiences, being like, yes, I masturbate, but it's sensory to me. It feels good because I still have like pleasure organs down there, and it feels nice. I just don't have any need to do it with anybody else. And like having these nuanced conversations of like, yeah, asexual people can still masturbate. Asexual people can still experience pleasure. Forms of affection don't have to be sexual. They can be sensory and sensual to people, and that's good as well. And the fact that he tries it and he explains that to Missy, and he's like, hey, like for me, masturbation is like getting a really good head massage or like a scalp massage, and maybe that's an activity we can do together, like for me, it's not sexual, so I'm not lying to you. But, like it helps them to sit there and understand each other and himself. And just, I appreciate that because so often we don't get that nuance in media. A lot of the asexuals we get, they're deemed asexual, as I said before, because they don't do anything. They're deemed asexual because there's a lack of something that other people have. But we never really get the time to explore what that asexuality means. Even with O, we're like, oh, she's asexual, but we never really elaborate on what that looks like for her. We just know that it makes her an outsider. And same thing with Todd Chavez. He just doesn't fuck, Even with Jonathan Sims in the Magnus archives, he's asexual, and that's defined by the fact that he doesn't have sex, but we never really look at like what else asexuality is and how that works for people who are ace. And so I really appreciate that they've created, honestly, the best nuanced asexual character I have seen in all of media so far, and it's in a fucking comedy sex show about horny middle schoolers made by comedians on Netflix. Like, I don't know how I feel about Big Mouth as a show, but I absolutely love Elijah, and if you have not watched Big Mouth and you are asexual, at least watch season 6 and season 7, episode 3, because it really just, I have never felt so seen and connected by an asexual character before, and I love him so much. I've only had him for like a day, but if anything happened to him, I would die for him. Yes. That being said, my experience with asexual media is severely limited, so if there's any asexual characters that you think I should review, that you think I would also like, or you argue are better, please let me know in the comments. I would love to engage more with asexual media. I know that there are a number of asexual books and asexual characters that I didn't talk about, such as Loveless by Alice Oseman, or any of Alice Oseman's things, because she is an asexual creator who writes asexual characters. I know Loveless is about the asexual experience, and there are other books like Ace is Wild, and things that are directly by aces for aces, which I have not engaged with, admittedly. So if there's any other of those stories or TV shows or anything that you think I should watch, or you want me to review, or you're like, you forgot this thing, and whatever, please let me know, because I would love to engage with them. That being said, it is the end of November, so have a very happy holiday season. be excellent to each other, and party on, dudes. So long. Thanks for all the fish.